Hey everyone, it's Schmuckles. Today we're going to lower down the possibilities for the March licensed new killer in Dead by Daylight. Matthew Cote's done a couple of new interviews and there's been more information in the leaking community surrounding the whole situation. So I kind of wanted to make a video that sort of speedruns the facts about the situation and sort of lowers it down in kind of a cutthroat sort of way of which licenses are possible and which licenses are not really possible. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you want speculation videos like this one recommended to you by YouTube. Also, the polls for Group F of the most hyped licenses for DBD tournament that we're doing right now is available in the community tab of my YouTube channel. Last video, I posted all of the new news for the most hyped licenses for DBD. A couple hours after posting that, Matthew Cote responded and said always quite entertaining, interesting speculations. I'm not gonna lie to you, the fact that Matthew Cote actually responded to this makes me think that probably none of the speculations that we had were quite on the money for the March license. Matthew Cote would not say anything that could be interpreted as a leak, but maybe some of those avenues are potentially possible for the future. I've been told by members of the leaking community that March is no longer considered to be the Grudge. Apparently, the hint that was suggesting the Grudge was that it's a popular IP in Asia, and I'm not actually sure if that's true or if that was a joke, but let's talk about the facts about the March licensed paragraph. Apparently, some people will bitch about it. These are Matthew Cote's words in his interview from the King. It's not going to be a toggling or shapeshifter killer, and to me this sort of suggests that this power might be some sort of teleport and or anti-loop ability. If this killer is sort of a return to traditional killer powers, could we use that to speculate what is next? Matthew Cote said it will create interesting discussions, suggesting maybe a niche license or maybe a part 2 chapter. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably not from Universal. Matthew Cote in his interview with the King mentioned a hypothetical situation of getting IPs from Universal. So I'm going to guess based on that it's probably not from Universal. The fact that he even mentioned that and that could be interpreted as a leak, we're just going to assume in this video that it's not from Universal. He also mentioned a hypothetical Warner Bros situation too. So maybe not from Warner Bros either. It could be a Blumhouse IP. Cote mentioned having regular talks with Blumhouse about the movie when he was asked about it. He didn't really volunteer the information hypothetically, so to me it makes me seem more likely that the IP is going to be from Blumhouse than from Universal or Warner Bros. Because the leaks have been so bad in the past, I don't think Matthew Cote would volunteer information that could be interpreted as a leak. That's the main thing I'm going off of for this video. The devs didn't hype up this license during the anniversary. They did mention that it's a licensed killer paragraph, however they did not hype it up the same as they did with Chucky's license paragraph at the previous anniversary. They said that Chucky's license was a license with a capital L, it's going to be a huge license, without explicitly saying that it's Chucky, and they didn't do that at the anniversary when mentioning this March licensed killer paragraph, suggesting a more niche license in this case. I'm also going to say that it's probably from the recent survey that was released. The whole Chucky wasn't on a previous survey argument justifying any horror license doesn't really hold a ton of weight, and that's because Chucky is such a special case. It's not like Chucky's a niche license that sort of appeared out of nowhere. Chucky is super iconic, and maybe they saw an opportunity to get Chucky right after releasing a survey. In general, the vast majority of licenses have been on previous surveys. I mean, let's take a look at some of the previous licensed killer releases. Resident Evil was on surveys before coming into the game. Hellraiser was on surveys before coming to the game. The Ring was on surveys before coming into the game. Even Resident Evil was still on surveys after the first Resident Evil chapter was announced. So Resident Evil Part 2 was still on surveys before coming into the game. Alien's been on surveys since the beginning. Chucky was not on any surveys. Alan Wake has been on previous surveys. Dungeons and Dragons was on a previous survey right before it was released into Dead by Daylight. Tomb Raider's been on surveys for years. Castlevania has been on surveys, and Five Nights at Freddy's has been on surveys too. I'm pretty sure Attack on Titans was on a survey too. Chucky was the only license that wasn't on a survey that appeared in the game. But Chucky is super iconic, and we believe that March is going to be something more niche. So using that line of logic, the March license is probably going to be a niche property that has appeared on the survey. We'll analyze some of the more mainstream licenses later in this video, but just based on these parameters, it seems like an anime or manga sort of fits this pretty well. Castlevania is an anime and Attack on Titan is a manga. Manga and anime both use similar distinctive illustration styles, but the word manga specifically refers to Japanese style graphic novels, while anime refers to the 2D animation Japanese style TV shows. In other words, manga are books, while anime consists of shows and movies. So it could be an anime or manga March licensed killer paragraph. The ones that have appeared on the survey: Jujutsu Kaisen, Junji Ito, Tokyo Ghoul, Ghostwire Tokyo, Death Note, Demon Slayer, and Chainsaw Man. Going back to the facts of the situation for the March license, if we apply this logic to Matthew Cote saying it will create interesting discussions, Castlevania is an anime. We've never actually seen a manga standalone chapter in Dead by Daylight. So could Matthew Cote be talking about the doors being opened out for manga to join as standalone content in DBD? We'll explore this possibility along with things he said in interviews a little bit later in this video. Based on these parameters, it's probably not Jason Voorhees. People would not really bitch about Jason Voorhees unless it's because it's not a full chapter. Matthew Cote talking Going in depth about Jason would kind of make no sense if Jason was about to be released. He wouldn't really talk about hypothetical powers for Jason and go in depth about that. He also did say this in the King's most recent interview with Matthew Cote.
Is Jason the next killer?
Not here, that's fine.
Makes sense. I think that's...
It's not me being the jerk not answering here. It's you being silly by asking, because there's...
It's not my questions. These are the community questions. I'm just doing a search.
You are not just a victim of...
I'm going to leave a link to the King's most recent interview with Matthew Cote in the description below. It seems like it's possible it could be Vecna from Stranger Things. Vecna from Stranger Things likely would not be a toggling killer power to differentiate Vecna from the Lich. It would kind of make no sense with no new Stranger Things survivors coming into the game. But the bottom line is Vecna is super iconic, one of the most requested licenses, and probably nobody would bitch about Vecna being added to the game. Matthew Cote hinted at more Stranger Things content coming into the game, but not right now.
Yeah, Matthew, do we expect any more Stranger Things content coming in the future? Have you been talking to Netflix?
I'm tempted to do my super annoying dreamy sort of thing and go, oh, I don't know. Do you expect any more Stranger Things content? Because that's how you worded your question. But I know that's not what you're asking. And that's one that I am unable to answer.
The March license probably isn't Pennywise. People would not bitch about Pennywise, and Pennywise could potentially be a shapeshifter power too. It's probably not Predator. We thought that Dracula's true form Mori might be a little bit too similar to Predator and a little bit too close to Predator's release. Also, since it's a paragraph, no Dutch with Predator kind of doesn't make sense either. The Walking Dead doesn't make sense because there's no survivors. Candyman can potentially make sense as a paragraph, although I don't know why people would bitch about Candyman. Probably not Candyman, but it does seem possible. It's definitely not Teletubbies. A DBD artist posted screenshots of Teletubbies and they're still up. We're going to say that it's not The Grudge because The Grudge was not on the recent survey. It's not Terrifier because the DBD dev Eric Pope responded to a fake Art the Clown leak, and there's no way a behavior dev would actually respond to this if Art the Clown was March. Megan does seem possible. It's not the most hyped license. And Matthew Cote did not suggest anything to be happening in the works with Blumhouse during that interview. It's kind of a newer IP, so maybe that's why people would bitch about it. The same logic applies for Malignant as well. No Survivor does make sense in the context of Malignant. However, Malignant was not on the satisfaction survey, so I think we actually have to put an X there next to Malignant. Megan's probably more likely than Malignant at this point. But if it was a Blumhouse IP, would Matthew Cote actually say that people would bitch about it? Matthew Cote, Behavior Interactive, are working with Blumhouse to make the Dead by Daylight movie, so I don't know why Matthew Cote would say anything sort of negative about a Blumhouse IP coming into the game. So what we're kind of concluding here is this next license is probably an anime or manga. Anyways, it's probably not The Thing because there's no Survivor, so no RJ McReady. And Cote did mention hypothetically doing a collab with Universal, which he probably wouldn't say if The Thing was the March license in DBD. Probably not The Conjuring. Behavior has not collabed with New Line Cinema since Freddy's DLC. There's been no evidence to suggest a good relationship with Warner Bros. It cannot be Outlast because recently the devs behind Outlast Red Barrels reached out to Behavior. They would not have admitted that if Outlast was March. Jurassic Park does seem possible. People would bitch because it's more sci-fi than horror, so I could see that. But we're speculating that it's probably not a Universal IP. Frank Stone kind of seems like something that could be possible. If you brought sort of the premium addition to the casting of Frank Stone, the Trapper in DBD receives a Frank Stone skin. So why would they bring in Frank Stone as a standalone killer after doing something like that? But nonetheless, it was on the survey and it would be licensed through Supermassive. BioShock seems like something that's potentially possible. Some sort of Big Daddy killer, and people would probably bitch that it's not iconic enough. But no new Rapture map sort of doesn't really make sense for me, so I kind of just have it down as a possibility. So far, we've really had nothing that fully checks out. The Terminator, people would probably bitch that it's outside the horror genre. Before the King's second interview with Matthew Cote, I had the Terminator as a potential possibility, and they worked with the license holders before on Death Garden. The King asked Matthew Cote, when is Terminator coming into Dead by Daylight? And Matthew Cote said this in the interview.
Strange
Maybe.
enough, Arnold is not returning my calls anymore.
So that's going to make Terminator pretty much impossible for March. On this cutthroat list, I sort of had the Gremlins as not possible for March. Although people would bitch about it not being iconic enough, it wasn't on the recent survey. Billy the Puppet seems to check a lot of the right boxes for all the facts that we have about the March license. People would bitch about it being underhyped and sort of being a boring part 2 chapter possibly for the Saw franchise. We went more in depth about this in the previous video. It would start discussions about part 2 chapters in DBD, but Matthew Cote mentioned the Lionsgate rights during a recent interview with the King, and he chose to bring up those license holders himself.
It's like Saw, for instance. Lionsgate owns the right to Saw, all the Saw movies, everything Saw related. and they're very close to the original creators. So in this case, for instance, we're interested in creating something new that hasn't been seen, like the blighted outfits, for instance. And they're like, sure, show us. We'll tell you if we think it's cool enough to put it in.
So Billy the Puppet does not seem possible for March to me anymore. The Universal Monster seems potentially possible. People will potentially bitch about it not being iconic enough. It could start interesting discussions of multiple licensed skins on one killer. And it's now showing up on the surveys when it wasn't before. Slenderman's another one that seems like it could be possible, though it's not a perfect fit. At the very least, Troy from Marble Hornets does not seem to be aware of a Slenderman collab. But would he actually know about this collab if it's going through a different license holder? Also, Slenderman is very hyped. I don't think very many people will be complaining about Slenderman being added to DBD. So that's why it's sort of not really a perfect fit either. Since 2021, there have been 3 satisfaction surveys where behavior listed possible upcoming licenses in the game and sort of asked for people's opinions on what they'd want to see. I went through the list myself, and these are sort of the licenses that were excluded from the recent survey that appeared on a previous survey. There's a lot of different IPs here. This is the movie and TV shows list, and we can see that Ju-on the Grudge is appearing on this list, as well as a couple of other notable IPs like Supernatural. I know people were asking for Supernatural, and the Train to Busan as well. So if there's any validity to the IP being popular in Asia, the Train to Busan did not appear on the recent survey. There was also some video game IPs that were excluded as well. So this is the list of licenses that appeared on previous surveys that are no longer appearing on surveys. So I don't think the March license is any one of these IPs either. And this is because all of the licenses that have come into the game, except for the super iconic special case Chucky, have appeared on a survey before coming into the game. And that even goes for Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons appeared on a survey right before it joined Dead by Daylight. So I have to think that all of these licenses are probably not possible for March. And if we take a look at all of the major movies and TV show licenses that we went over in this video, nothing seems to be a perfect fit. Out of the major IPs from movies and TV shows, including Vecna is kind of borderline in my opinion. We have 8 possible licenses that could be March. There's Vecna, Candyman, Megan, Jurassic, Slenderman, Frank Stone, Bioshock, and Universal Monsters. So that kind of leads me to the final part of this video, which I think is the most likely case for the March license now. And that really is an anime license. Also, let's look at what Matthew Cote recently said in an interview.
But the thing is, we have to take swings, right?
Absolutely.
We have to try. And not all of them are going to make sense. Not all of them are going to work. But it does mean that we have a chance of actually hitting it out of the park. I think Nick Cage is a great example of that, right?
The idea of behavior shooting their shot and taking more risk with licenses really makes me think it could be possible to be headed towards more niche anime and manga licenses. That interview comes from Slasher Radio. A big shout out and a big thanks to Slasher Radio for getting that information. I'm going to leave a link to Slasher Radio's socials in the description below. It would make sense for people to bitch about an anime license because it's not as mainstream here as it is in Asia. I was just looking into Dead by Daylight Mobile a little bit. There's like the English version of the Dead by Daylight Mobile Twitter account. It has 177,000 followers on Twitter. The only other language that has a Dead by Daylight Mobile official Twitter account is Dead by Daylight Japan, and that has 208,000 followers for Dead by Daylight Mobile Japan. And we know in the core game as well, there's a very large player base that exists in Japan too. And based on the metrics on Twitter, there's definitely a big DBD Mobile Japan player base too. There's even a separate DBD Mobile Japan website. It's a fully functional Japanese version of the DBD Mobile website just for the Japan player base. If it actually was a real hint that the IP is popular in Japan, on top of all the information that Matthew Cote said, it does seem like some sort of Japanese IP is what's most likely for the March license. Well, back in 2022, there was actually a survey in DBD Mobile. Pretty much there was a second beta test that happened with DBD Mobile from November 9th to November 22nd. There was a survey they were able to click on where they were able to answer a series of questions about the game. And one of the questions was, are there any IP works you are expecting Dead by Daylight Mobile to collaborate with in the future? Select up to 3 choices. And there were a lot of Japanese IPs actually listed on this survey. And some of these licenses overlapped with the core game survey too. And they're all mangas, which we've never seen a standalone manga chapter in DBD. And Matthew Cote said that this chapter is going to create interesting discussions. It could be the first standalone manga March license killer paragraph. So I'm just going to read off some of the mangas that was on this survey, which we think was largely targeting the Japanese player base. Jujutsu Kaisen, Junji Ito, Death Note, Attack on Titan was on there, 7 Deadly Sins, Vagabond, and Chainsaw Man. There's also a category listed others where you could type in your response. And in parentheses there, the first thing it says is manga, then movie, TV series, video games. Based on everything that's happening and the things that Matthew Cote have said about this license, I'm thinking it's most likely a manga at this point. The manga licenses that we mentioned at the beginning of this video all also appeared on the DBD mobile survey as well back in 2021. So there actually is a big possibility that one of these licenses could be the March license. And in my opinion, Matthew Cote saying that people would bitch about it eliminates a lot of the possibilities. So this video served to be sort of a speed run and sort of a deep dive into what we think is possible for the March license. And this is sort of what we're coming up with as the possibilities. I will say that this video is largely speculation, so anything is technically possible for the March license. But I think sort of just analyzing the specific situation that we're in right now, this is sort of how likely each license is. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you want to be up to date with the current situation for the March license. That does it for this video. Goodbye.